The topic at hand is a very, very interesting topic tonight, which is life absurd in the absence of God? It's a very interesting question. It's a very pressing question because the way I want to look at it tonight is, that if you deny God, if you turn away from God, if you reject God, and you claim to be an atheist or a naturalist, and I'm going to define my terms just so we're clear here. When I say atheist, I'm referring to those individuals that, generally speaking, say there is no God, there is no creator, or no gods for that matter. And a naturalist is someone who would say, well, all that exists is the physical material world. There is nothing beyond the physical. It's all matter. And everything can be explained via physical causes, right? So most atheists, as is understood by Richard Dawkins, most atheists are naturalists. Now, I'd like to know what John's position is tonight as well. It would help resulting in a more of a fruitful discussion from that perspective. But if you adopt atheism or naturalism, what implications does that have on your life? Now, what I'm going to be suggesting tonight is that life becomes absurd from almost every single perspective. And the way I want to look at this initially is from the perspective of the things that really matter to us as human beings. The deeper questions of life, such as, what is my purpose? What is my ultimate purpose? Let's begin with this question for a second. The question of purpose, the question of ultimate purpose is something that has been around for, we don't know how long, God knows how long, right? It's been there from the beginning of time, if you like. Philosophers, thinkers, they've engaged with this question. They've asked this question. They've tried to figure out the answers to this question. And this is a question that many of us ask today. What is the purpose of my existence? What is the purpose of my life? Why am I here? Why do I exist? And what I want to suggest here is that if you adopt atheism or naturalism, there is no answer. There is no ultimate purpose to your existence. Now, before I sort of discuss this any further, let me just highlight that when you say you're an atheist or a naturalist, you are denying a creator, a cause. And essentially what you are saying otherwise, or in another way of looking at it, is that everything is a result of random physical processes. Atoms and molecules have been whizzing around for God knows how many years, obviously pun intended here, God knows how long. Atoms and molecules whizzing around at random have been colliding into each other and have resulted in everything that we see in existence today. And I want us to really think about this for a second. Essentially, everything we see in existence today is one big accident. It's an accidental byproduct of lengthy processes, random, cold, physical processes that have been taking place at random and have resulted in everything we see in existence today. And that includes ourselves. And if that is the case, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, if that is the case, then where is the ultimate purpose? Accidents don't have a purpose. You spill milk, it's spilt milk. It doesn't have a purpose. It wasn't intended. There is no ultimate purpose on atheism or naturalism. Now, you may be thinking, this guy, he looks like he's Pakistani, maybe Asian, he's been practicing all of his life. Well, that wasn't the case. I also found myself in a position in my life at a point where I questioned life. I was at the place where it wasn't even a question about whether God exists or not. I was in a place where I wasn't concerned about the question whether God exists or not. I was just too busy, like most of us are these days. So from one perspective, I was an atheist. You can see me as someone that lived like an atheist or a naturalist. And I found myself in the very same position because what I realized was, if you logically follow through with the implications of atheism and naturalism, that's what we're discussing here. If you logically follow through with the implications, you end up at the realization that there is no ultimate purpose to existence. And that creates a lot of angst. It creates a lot of anxiety inside the human being. I suffered from anxiety and depression related to these existential questions for a very long time. And I thought through these things as well, and I tried to find answers, but I realized that logically speaking, there were no answers, at least to start off with the question of purpose, ultimate purpose. Now, what do I do in this position, I thought to myself? And as have many philosophers throughout history, what do we do when you end up in this position? Now, there are a few ways people have tried to deal with this type of existential nihilism, if you like, that there is no ultimate purpose to life. One of the ways was, you had the existentialist philosophers, and what they suggested, at least most of them, they said, look, you end up in a position where there is no purpose to life. You recognize this, acknowledge this. But now what you have to do is you have to live with purpose. You have to give yourselves purpose. You have to make purpose up for yourselves. And they would present this idea in a very eloquent and uplifting way. And to be honest, when you're in that position, there's only so much you could do. So I commend them for that. However, the thing about human nature is we don't like to be lied to, and we don't like lying to ourselves. And essentially what we're doing is when we say, I have no ultimate purpose, but I'm going to give myself purpose, what we're essentially doing is we're saying, I'm going to make purpose up. I'm going to make purpose up for myself. In other words, if you want to look at it in a crude way, we're actually lying to ourselves just to get by. And that didn't sit well with me. It didn't work for too long, right? And it doesn't work for many people. So that doesn't work. And the other alternative, if you like, was you can reduce it down to biology. You can say, well, I've evolved and I'm here, and the only purpose to my existence, this accidental existence, is to propagate my genes, as Richard Dawkins would have you believe in the selfish gene. Now, if you want to reduce it to such a level, then be my guest, do that. But that's no different from eating and sleeping. We do these things anyway. But yet we still ask the deeper questions of life. What is the purpose of my existence? And what's really funny is recently I watched a clip by Richard Dawkins, and he's gone even further with his understanding in regards to the purpose of our material existence, at least. And he even says that the human being, we're nothing but just disposable, and I'm paraphrasing his words, we're just nothing but disposable machines for our genes. Now, well, that's going to really help us finding our ultimate purpose, right? That type of outlook, right? So that didn't really help me. And that didn't work for me either. So now I'm thinking, okay, there seems to be no avenue here as to, or way I can take out of this conundrum, out of this problem. So I thought, you know what, maybe value is what I need to think about. Human life is valuable, it's sacred. We all acknowledge this, we all realize this, we all understand this. Even atheists and naturalists understand this. Humanism, it's based on one of the tenets, the fundamental tenets is that human life is sacred, it's valuable. So I said, you know what, I have no purpose to live, but life being valuable, that should be enough to keep me going. Well, when I inquired and I thought about the question of value, you soon realize that again on atheism and naturalism, there is no special value to human life. Now, let me just give you guys an example just to put things into perspective. We have a pen here, a very nice Manchester University, I believe it's by someone else, or whoever it's by. It's a nice little purple pen in my hand, right? If I was to ask you guys, what's more valuable, me or this pen? What would you say? I want you to think about it for a second. Most of us, hopefully all of us, would say, well, you're more valuable, right? Imagine if I put you guys in a situation and I said, look, or imagine hypothetically for a second that you guys suffer from a particular condition. You have an anger problem which can't be resolved by any medication. So what the doctors told you is that whenever you get angry, you have to express your anger. And to do that, he's given you a hammer to carry around with you. Okay? I know it's a bit of a crazy example, but just go with it for a second, yeah? You've got a hammer in your pocket. And imagine for some reason you get really angry right now, and you have a choice to make. You have a choice to make between smashing me as a human being and smashing this pen. What would you smash? It's a question. What would you guys smash? Yeah, hopefully everyone will say the pen, right? It's because we realize, it's almost intuitive that human life is valuable and precious. Yet what I'm positing to you here is that on naturalism and atheism, and when we understand this, like I said, it all boils down to what? Blind, random physical processes. There is literally no difference between me and the pen. Now, on hearing this, you may be outraged. You may think, what is he talking about? You're conscious, you're rational, you feel, you're a human being, right? You're alive. We'll say all of these things. We're probably thinking of these things right now. Now, I can understand the sentiments that we have. However, let's not get sentimental, because at the end of the day, there's no difference. It's just one arrangement of atoms and molecules as opposed to another. And these ideas that you may be just firing off in your heads right now, that he's more conscious, he's more valuable, he's rational, he's intelligent, hopefully you think he's intelligent, but whatever the case is, all of these things that you think, these are simply, on atheism and naturalism, these are simply ideas that you may have picked up from society, may have thought up in your minds right now, but they have no intrinsic value, because they are a result of nothing but chemical firings in your brain, which are a result of atoms and molecules. That's all it is. So essentially, there is no difference. There's no need to get sentimental about this. There's no difference between me, the pen, the table, the chair, the computer, or anything else. The only difference is that these are just different arrangements of matter. That's all it is. Now, hopefully we can start to appreciate something here, which is that On atheism and naturalism, the human being is being pushed into a corner. You're being reduced down or reduced to the point where you can't even account for those things you know to be true as a human being. The things that make you human, purpose, value. If you can't make sense of these things anymore, at least we should realize there's a bit of a disparity. There's something that's not adding up. This worldview or outlook or ideology, whatever you want to call it, because I know some atheists have a problem me calling atheism an ideology or a worldview. Whatever you want to call it, it has implications, and the implications here are that it strips you from being able to account for those very things you know to be true as a human being. And that is problematic. That is highly problematic. We've seen some of the atrocities that such views have resulted in throughout history, and we can see or potentially think of problems that such views can cause in the future. Now, I'm talking about logical implications here, guys, right? I'm not just talking about wishy-washy things. I'm saying let's logically think about it. And when you do, these are the conclusions you come to, right? Now, let's explore this a bit further. Something else which is very integral to human life, human beings, which are ethics, morals. As human beings, almost every action we take is a moral and ethical action. It has implications, moral implications. And we consider this as human beings. However, what I want to suggest here is that on atheism and naturalism, there is no account for objective moral values and truths. Right? Now let me define what I mean by objective so we're very clear here. When I say objective moral values and truths, we're talking about objectivity, which means that it's not subject to the human being or human understanding. The morals are external to the human being. Right? Now from an Islamic perspective, which I'll discuss in a second, we can ontologically ground our morals in God. However, on atheism and naturalism, you don't have an anchor. It's just subjective. All you can do, well, what options do you have? Let's just engage with just think through some of the options we have on atheism and naturalism. Well, one of them is social consensus. Society comes together and decides what is wrong and what is right, and that's what we base our morals on. Well, hold on a second. Social consensus throughout history, we have seen examples of where the consensus of a society, for example, Nazi Germany, have resulted in some atrocious things, right? And even if you were to say 10 or 15 people get together and say X is wrong, well, say 10 or 15 other people get together and say X is right. Who is right? There's no objectivity there. It's just subjective opinions against each other. Well, social consensus doesn't make morals or give us an objective foundation for morals. Well, what else is there? Well, you may say it's my own views and ideas. Again, it's your subjective opinions. You may want to reduce morals down to evolution, right? Now, obviously, if you look at the experts in the field, they will tell you that evolution doesn't give you morality. It may give you the tools you need to be able to come up with moral outlooks. However, evolution does not render morality objective in any way, shape, or form. Because if our morals are subject to evolution, they're subject to change. Darwin noticed something very interesting, and he mentioned this, where he highlighted that if we had evolved under different conditions, we would have a totally different moral outlook. Imagine, and he gives the example of hive bees. Sorry, John, I don't want to steal your water. Is that yours?
That's not mine. Yes, no? Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So Darwin gave a very beautiful example of hive bees, and he said, look, if we were reared under the same condition as hive bees, the mothers of the bees would think it a sacred duty to kill the fertile daughters, and no one would think anything of it. Hamza, in his book, The Divine Reality, makes another similar point. He says, look, if we had evolved under the same conditions as nurse sharks, we would find it okay to rape our partners, because that's what they do, and no one would think anything of it. So evolution does not render morality objective in any way, shape, or form. It's just subject to moral change. And I believe John in his book highlights, well, no one's saying, we've stopped evolving or morals have stopped evolving. So it shows it's still subject to change over time. So if you don't have evolution as an explanation for objective morality, then to be honest, there are some other ideas out there such as consequentialism, etc. And I may deal with that if John brings that up. But the point being is that on atheism and naturalism, you do not have an account for objective moral values and truths and duties. You're left with just morality being subjective. And what's the problem here? The issue here is then that if morality is just your subjective opinion, then it means nothing. Hence, when atheists point the finger towards religious people and towards Muslims and Islam, and based on their limited understanding of the text, assert certain things and make certain moral claims, and they express those claims as if they're objectively true, this is objectively wrong, this is bad, this is evil, well, they're not in any position to do so because they can't ground their morality in any objective way, in anything. That's highly problematic. Right? You can't have your cake and eat it. It doesn't make any sense. So if you're going to make claims, moral claims, you have to first ground or show us how you ground your morality, how you deem it to be objective, and how you make sense of that. That's if you accept morality is objective. And if you don't, well, then you're not in any position to make any claims anymore. So hopefully, see, you can see the picture developing now. There's loads of areas I can go into, but time doesn't permit me to do that. But hopefully we can start to appreciate how atheism and naturalism, as I've said before, it reduces you down to the point where you can't account for those very things that make you human. And that is the absurdity of atheism and naturalism. But unfortunately, many people don't follow through. Most atheists don't get the time to think about these realities and think about the logical implications of atheism and naturalism. Hence, they don't worry about these things. They're too busy. But I really encourage the atheists to really think about these realities, because these are the things that make you human, right? It's very important to think about these things. You can't dismiss them. Now, the other thing, the last thing I want to touch upon is this whole idea of meaningful happiness. As human beings, we want to be happy. That's another integral aspect of our lives. We chase happiness. But again, on atheism and naturalism, you can't have meaningful happiness. And this is the reason why. Now, going back to my story, I found myself in a position where there's no ultimate purpose, there is no value to human existence, there's no grounding for objective morals. It's just all becoming meaningless for me at this point. So when I don't have answers to these fundamental questions, how can I expect to be happy in any meaningful way? Let me give you guys a bit of a thought experiment quickly. Imagine for a second you fall asleep right now, and as you fall asleep, you go into a really deep sleep, and you wake up, and the next thing you realize, you're not in this auditorium anymore. You're on a train, and the train's traveling at 200 miles an hour down some track. The windows are closed, the doors are closed. What's the first questions that come to your mind? Who am I? Not who am I, where am I going? Who put me on the train? Where's the train gonna stop? What's going on? And these questions will be natural to us, and they'll cause a lot of anxiety. Now, as you're engaging with these questions, imagine for a moment you're presented with this amazing meal, a 5-star meal, and you taste the food, and it's the most amazing food you've ever tasted. Now, you may be temporarily distracted and experience a sense of joy and happiness, but is that going to last, firstly? And secondly, is that going to be a meaningful type of happiness or joy if you don't have the answers to those fundamental questions you've just asked as to how you got on the train and where it's going? No. And that's the reality of life. We have these pressing questions that we ask as human beings. It's a part of our nature to engage with these questions. Yet, on atheism and naturalism, we find no answers. And that's highly problematic, because here we find a contradiction between these outlooks on life and human nature itself. And at the very least, that should get us to question our position of atheism and naturalism. Because human beings don't like living a contradiction. Human beings don't like living in this state of dissonance. We need to find balance, and you're not going to find it. Your nature is never going to be in conformity with naturalism or atheism. Now, hopefully we can see that atheism, it just doesn't make sense of those most fundamental things we know to be true as human beings. Now, how does Islam answer the question? The next minute, just quickly. From the perspective of purpose, God says clearly in the Quran, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. God answers the question of purpose. He created us to know Him and to worship Him. And what's beautiful about the Quran is that this is the purpose of our existence, and the entire Quran revolves around this fundamental message. It's all related to purpose. And that's amazing. In other words, the entire Quran revolves around the purpose of human existence. Not only tells us what our purpose is, but helps us and aids us in fulfilling it. Right? And that's something profound about the Quran. Also, from the perspective of value throughout the Quran, I'll give you maybe an example in my rebuttal, but throughout the Quran, God speaks about human value, how human life is sacred, how the children of Adam have been given this sacred value in and of themselves. God has created them as a special creation. So value, God gives us value from that perspective, and not only us value, but our actions value too, what we do and how we live our lives. Thirdly, when it comes to happiness, God says in the Quran, indeed, in the remembrance of God do hearts find rest. And very interesting, and this sort of highlights the internal coherence of the Quran here. When God says, in the remembrance of God do hearts find rest, I'm going to carry on in my rebuttal, hopefully. Thank you guys for listening.